The first major opinion poll of the year shows federal Labor has failed to pick up ground over summer. The coalition holds a commanding lead over the government in the latest news poll. Labor's primary vote is 30%, with the coalition on 45%.
Julia Gillard has also lost ground to opposition leader Tony Abbott as preferred Prime Minister, but she still leads Mr Abbott 40% to 37%.
For more, Melissa Clark joins us now from Canberra. Good morning to you, Melissa. The government has failed to make up any ground, hasn't it?
What we have is effectively the Labor Party where it was at the end of the parliamentary year, now going into the parliamentary year. So if we look at the primary vote figure in the latest news poll, what we have is just small movements within the margin of error. The primary vote for the ALP is down at 30% and the coalition at 45%, so up 1% from last month and down 1% for the ALP. But if we go back just a month further, back to the November news poll polling figures that the Australian publishes, what you have is the ALP was back at 30% then, so it's steady. And in fact, the coalition was 48% at that point. So over the last 2 months, the coalition's primary figure has actually gone down a little bit. If we move to the two-party preferred vote, which is how an election result would pan out once preferences are distributed, what we there have is the latest figures are steady from December to January. The ALP at 46%, the coalition at 54%. Now, that's actually an improvement compared to December, so just 2 months ago. You've actually seen the ALP narrow the gap there. So although the figures from December to January haven't really changed that much as an overall picture, it shows that the government, depending on your point of view, either hasn't made up any ground at all or hasn't managed to lose any ground despite some of the events over the summer period.
And as preferred Prime Minister, how is Julia Gillard faring?
Well, as preferred Prime Minister, if we take a look at her figures over the last 3 polling periods from Newspoll, it actually hasn't changed a great deal. So back in November, she was at 40%. That was to Tony Abbott's 35%. Then December, she was improved slightly to 43%, and now it's down 3% back to 40% in January. So although it's a 3% drop, which is just right on that margin of error for Newspoll, it shows over the summer period it's moved around, but is effectively where it was for Julia Gillard at the end of last year to the start of this year. Now, Tony Abbott has risen a little bit in that process in preferred Prime Minister, or who makes a better Prime Minister. So the gap has been narrowed a little by Tony Abbott, but these are small changes. And if we were to look at the figures of satisfaction and dissatisfaction with both Julia Gillard and Tony Abbott, they've bounced around a little bit, but over the last few months, they haven't really changed all that much. And interestingly, they're at about the same level in terms of satisfaction and dissatisfaction for Tony Abbott and Julia Gillard. So despite the coalition's large lead when it comes to the primary vote and two-party preferred vote, for Tony Abbott, he is still not making up those extra figures when it comes to his personal rating.
So what else is happening in Canberra today, Melissa?
Well, the focus is going to be on Tony Abbott today because he's giving an address to the National Press Club today. So this will be a speech where he outlines his vision for the year ahead, talks about the coalition's plans when it comes to the Parliament itself, when it looks at the parliamentary challenges in terms of legislation and taking up the fight to the government. So this is an opportunity for Tony Abbott to be perhaps a little more positive in outlining a vision and try and counter some of those arguments from the Labor Party that has been too negative across the board. So we will be seeing that from Canberra at lunchtime today.
Melissa Clark in